Hello, my name is Beririn and I'm the creator of a webcomic called Butterflies of Club La Parfait, which is currently out in Webtoon Canvas. If you haven't seen it, please check it out. It's a story about an anxious, timid girl thrown to work for a group of flamboyant drag queens in a small city nightclub to pay for her father's debts. So, if you're into makeover-y modern Cinderella stories with themes of fashion, family, healing from past trauma, finding oneself, all in a very queer story, this is definitely something you should check out. Today, this is the story we're going to work on in this video, and I'm going to show you my process on how I make an episode of my webcomic from the writing stage all the way to preparing the final uploadable files. But first, before we dive in, please like this video and subscribe to this new baby channel for more upcoming videos on webcomic, manga, and anime related topics, tips, and life in general. Back to the topic, I'd like to make a disclaimer that I am not claiming that this is the right way to do this. I am obviously not an authority in Webtoon making tutorials. This is just me sharing to you guys my process on how I make my webcomic. The whole process can be summed up in these following steps. Personally, I have no professional background in writing scripts and stories. I did journalism in high school, but that's very different from this, I think. So, what I know about preparing a script for webcomic and manga comes from my experiences on working in the field. I start with writing down my story in a Word application like Google Docs or Microsoft Word. Now, the writing stage itself can be a whole topic altogether as it's its very own world to discuss. But to simplify, I just write down the story as it comes to my mind. At this early step, it doesn't really matter how professional looking the write-up is. All that matters is that I have the general idea of what I want to happen on the episode and describe it as clear as I can. When I'm writing the overall story arc and episodes, I let my thoughts free flow in paragraphs and just describe very plainly how I want things to go. This frees my mental workload from having to think of the panels and layouts very early in the process and just completely focus on the story and what's happening. Once I'm satisfied with the flow of the story, I move to Google Sheets. Yep, you heard that right, Google Sheets. And I make a numbered graph that ranges from 40 to 50 because this is usually the panel count I want my average episode length to be. From the first document I made, I rewrite and plan the story details into panels. Using a graph like this helps me keep track of my panel plans. Also, this method I use of writing the story in plain paragraphs or in script form and then rewriting them in numbered cells allows me to focus separately on the story and the storytelling, which is quite different. Webtoon actually made a video on the difference of story versus storytelling, and I put the link to that in the description below, so feel free to check that out. Once my script and panel plan is ready, I move on to the next part and make the initial layout of the comic. The software I use is Clip Studio Paint. A lot of manga and webcomic artists also use it as it has tons of features and tools that can help make making comics easier and more efficient. I start with a long canvas of 800 by 20,000 pixels set to 300 dpi. You can always make this a little bit longer or shorter later on if you need to, but for me, this is my starting size. Then, I start just sketching the overall layout of how I want my comic to flow downwards vertically. Usually, it takes me 2 or 3 of these canvases to make one episode. I am careful to take note of timing and pacing, as putting a lot or very little distance between panels and images will give this effect of time passing or a quicker flow of dialogue. Which matters to me a lot when it comes to my layout because I want my readers to be able to feel the right timing for each jokes or feels on each scene. Once I'm satisfied with my rough layout, I move on to setting up my panels. I use Clip Studio Paint's box panel tool for this, and it helps manage the folders of my files. I am a huge sucker for organizing my folders because I get lost easily if I don't, and I can't really trust my mind to keep track of which layer I put what, so it just gets my mind on ease to work. Next, I drop 3D assets to wherever I need them in the layout. Now, this has been a debate before, and a lot of people feel conflicted using 3D models and assets for their art. I plan on making a separate video about using them and stuff, but the general gist is that using 3D assets to make your webcomic making process more efficient is okay. A lot of professional artists use them, like Inio Asano for example, the legend who made Oyasumi Punpun, uses Unreal Engine for some of his works. Yume, the creator of Fish Eye Placebo, uses 3D as well, and just overall 3D assets like this are godsend when making comics. I use them mostly to help with backgrounds, tricky perspective, creative camera angles, and poses. As someone who struggles and gets stuck a lot with being a perfectionist, using them helps me save tons of hours of redrawing and making. Although sometimes, like in this case, I put in the background first, especially when the scene relies heavily in the depiction of the scene's environment. I put in the background, apply the character models, and then I adjust accordingly. Next, once I've figured out where my characters will be, how much space they'll take, this is the part where I put the text bubbles or balloons, and the dialogue. I do that in this stage for a very specific reason. I have had so many times when I spent so much time detailing a section of my artwork just to find out that that part was just going to be blocked by a text bubble. I hated that when that happens, so to avoid that from happening, I put my speech bubbles in advance. This also helps me make sure the dialogue's text layout flows naturally. From this, I start on the line work, which is actually one of my favorite steps. Then I move on to coloring. Now that the coloring's done, next I take care of the background, especially if I hadn't done so in the earlier phase. Once we're done with the backgrounds, we're pretty much almost there. At this phase, I put extra sound effects and signs where I may have missed them, or wherever necessary. I also adjust lighting and colors in this phase just to put that extra touch. A little side note, like as you may have seen in these video clips, sometimes I do these steps per panel. Like I would take care of the draft in one panel first, then the line work, and onto the other steps before doing that all over again in the next panel. It usually depends on my mood really, or in the level of excitement I have to make certain panels that I really like. My process isn't set in stone, but this is just to get the overall summary of how I do my webcomics. I write them up, do the rough layout in Clip Studio, make the panels, text balloons, then line work, colors, backgrounds, and then the effects. And that's the webcomic. To prepare the file for uploading to Webtoons, which is currently where I upload my series, I export the file as a PNG and I upload it to a site called Croppy. Croppy automatically compresses and cuts my very long canvas into multiple images with smaller file sizes that I can upload straight to Webtoon. Once in Webtoon, I name the episode, schedule it for the next episode release, and repeat the whole process all over again. Because making comics is a process, and I love it, and I wouldn't give it up for the world. Making a webcomic, as you've seen with me and possibly many other creators, it's very taxing. It's tiring, it's a lot of things to do, usually on a tight schedule or alongside a creator's day job or school works. It's a lot of stuff, and most of the time, we run solely on passion and the love of what we do or the stories that we want to tell. So if you want to support me, my baby channel, and my art and webcomic, please consider joining my Patreon where you can support the channel for as little as $1 a month and join me as I build a community where we can discuss art, webcomics, and my personal favorite, RuPaul's Drag Race and drag queens.
Sissy that wow.
Thanks for watching everyone. Like and subscribe so you can watch when the next videos drop. Everybody say love and keep your magic alive. Bye bye!